Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a stack of sources today that tell a story so strange, if you pitched it as a movie script, the studio would probably send it back with a note saying, this is too confusing, nobody has two numbers.
It is a bit of a logic puzzle, isn't it?
It really is. We are looking at a monarch today, a central figure in European history who goes by the name Francis. But depending on which history book you open, or, which paragraph of the same book you're reading, he is listed as Francis II or Francis II.
And that's the key.
And I want to be crystal clear for everyone listening right at the top. We aren't talking about a father and a son here.
No.
We aren't talking about cousins. We are talking about the same man in the same lifetime.
That's right. In German historiography, he's often called the Doppelkaiser.
The double emperor.
The double emperor, which I know sounds like a very ominous comic book villain or maybe a very expensive sandwich, but it actually describes a unique legal survival strategy that we haven't really seen before or since.
Mm-hmm. And that nickname, the Doppelkaiser, is really the hook for me. Because this isn't just a story about a guy who decided to rebrand because he didn't like the number 2.
Not at all.
This deep dive is about survival on a continental scale. We are looking at a man who sat on a throne that had existed for 1,000 years, the Holy Roman Empire, and watched it literally disintegrate beneath him.
And yet, and this is a crucial part, he didn't disappear with it. Most monarchs who lose their empires, they end up in exile, or in a prison cell, or
on the scaffold.
Francis managed to swap horses in midstream while the river was on fire.
Let's set the scene because the context here is just wild. I mean, the map of Europe is exploding. The French Revolution is tearing up the rule book of how the world works. Napoleon is rising, marching across the continent like a force of nature.
It's total chaos.
And sitting in Vienna on this ancient, creaky throne is Francis. And as we went through the source material, the stack of letters, patents, and biographies, what struck me is that he seems like the ultimate underdog. But not the scrappy hero underdog. Well, how would you describe him?
He's the bureaucratic underdog.
Yeah.
The sources paint a picture of a man who isn't the brilliant conqueror. He isn't the charismatic leader who gives the big inspirational speech.
Right.
But he is a brilliant survivor. He is, the cockroach in the nuclear wasteland of the Napoleonic Wars. He just keeps going.
That is a vivid image. So that's our mission today. We want to understand how a man who is described by his own family, his own uncle, actually, as a spoiled mother's child, managed to outlast Napoleon Bonaparte. How do you preside over the death of the Holy Roman Empire and the birth of the Austrian Empire without losing your head?
Well, I think we have to start with that description you just mentioned, spoiled mother's child. That wasn't just a random insult thrown out at a family dinner. That was a diagnosis.
It's a clinical assessment.
A clinical assessment from the man who shaped Francis's entire worldview.
Let's rewind the clock then. To understand the emperor, we have to understand the boy. And honestly, the source material on his childhood is a little heartbreaking. It starts out well enough, right? He's born in 1768 in Florence.
Florence is crucial here. At the time, his father, Leopold, is the Grand Duke of Tuscany. And the Tuscan court was, it was different. It was the Enlightenment in practice. It was relatively loose, indulgent, and warm.
So not the stiff, formal Vienna court we might picture.
Not at all. Francis grows up surrounded by siblings in a happy, sunny Italian atmosphere. They're running around the Palazzo Pitti, eating good food, enjoying the Italian sun.
It sounds idyllic. It sounds like the kind of childhood anyone would want. But in the Habsburg family, happiness usually means you aren't important enough yet.
That's a great way to put it.
And destiny comes knocking in the form of his uncle, the Holy Roman Emperor, Joseph II.
Joseph II is a massive figure in history, one of the enlightened despots. He wanted to modernize everything, rationalize everything. He was a workaholic who slept on a straw mat. But personally, he was intense.
Intense is one word for it.
And he had a problem. He had no surviving children. His wives had died, his children had died.
So he looks at his brother Leopold's family in Florence, this big, happy, chaotic Italian family, and points at young Francis.
Exactly. He knew Francis was the future. The weight of the entire Habsburg legacy, a legacy that spanned Spain, Austria, the Netherlands, the Americas, the Holy Roman Empire, was going to fall on this kid. So in 1784, when Francis is just a teenager, Joseph orders him to Vienna.
This is the imperial boot camp phase.
It was an abduction in all but name. Joseph II took personal charge of Francis's development, and Joseph looked at this soft Italian-raised boy and was, I think, just horrified. He saw a kid who's used to comfort, used to smiling, used to being loved.
And Joseph decided he needed to break him.
Break him down to build him up in his mind.
I found some direct quotes from Joseph II in the notes, and they are brutal. I mean, just imagine your uncle writing this about you in official state papers that historians are going to read 200 years later. He called Francis stunted in growth, backward in bodily dexterity, and, here's that kicker again, neither more nor less than a spoiled mother's child.
It's incredibly harsh. But you have to understand Joseph's perspective. He wasn't trying to be cruel for fun. He was terrified for the state. He analyzed the boy and concluded, and I'm paraphrasing the source here, that the way Francis had been treated for 16 years had confirmed him in the delusion that the preservation of his own person was the only thing of importance.
The preservation of his own person. Keep that phrase in mind. Because Joseph meant it as a scathing criticism. He meant Francis was selfish and soft.
Yeah.
But looking at the rest of Francis's life,
Yeah.
that becomes his superpower, doesn't it?
It becomes his prime directive. It becomes the lens through which he sees every single decision. But Joseph's method for fixing this defect was what he called fear and unpleasantness.
Fear and unpleasantness. That sounds like the title of a really bad parenting book.
He literally wrote that down as a pedagogical strategy.
Yeah.
He deliberately isolated the young archduke. He cut him off from his friends, from any comfort.
Why? What was the logic there?
He believed Francis failed to lead himself or do his own thinking because he was always coddled. So Joseph forced independence through isolation. He made Francis feel utterly alone in the world.
That sounds deeply traumatic. You take a teenager, you rip him away from his family, tell him he's worthless and stunted, and then you isolate him in a cold palace in Vienna with a guy who sleeps on straw.
It was traumatic. But we have to ask, did it work? It definitely shaped Francis's ruling style. It created a man who was disciplined. Yes, he learned to work hard. But it also created a man who was deeply, deeply suspicious.
Yeah.
A man who learned that the world is a dangerous place, that people are essentially threats, and that you have to protect yourself above all else because no one else is going to do it for you.
And he didn't just stay in the classroom, right? The sources mention he was sent to join the army.
Yes, to a regiment in Hungary. And surprisingly, Francis actually settled into military life quite well. He was present at the siege of Belgrade during the Austro-Turkish War. So he wasn't a coward physically.
He could do the job.
He learned the routine of command. He learned how to sit on a horse and look like an emperor. But the psychological imprint of the uncle, that never went away.
It's that classic complex relationship. He feared Joseph, but the sources say he admired him too. He wanted to be him, but he was terrified of him.
And he didn't have to wait long to take the reins. Joseph II works himself to death, quite literally, and dies in 1790. Francis's father, Leopold, becomes emperor. Leopold tries to fix the mess Joseph left, but the strain is too much. He dies just 2 years later, in March 1792.
So at 24 years old, just 24, Francis is now the Holy Roman Emperor. He's the secular head of Christendom. And talk about bad timing. What does the inbox look like in 1792?
The inbox is on fire. The French Revolution is in full swing. The Bastille has fallen. The monarchies of Europe are terrified.
Absolutely terrified.
The very idea of monarchy is under attack. And Francis, who we know has been trained to be suspicious and fearful of chaos, is now staring down the barrel of revolutionary France.
And this isn't just geopolitical abstract theory for him, it's personal.
Very personal. His aunt is Marie Antoinette.
The Queen of France.
Right. She's his father's sister. And in 1793, just a year into Francis's reign, she is guillotined by the revolutionaries.
And you have to put yourself in his shoes. You're 25. You've been trained by a scary uncle to be paranoid. And now the neighbors have just chopped off your aunt's head. That has to set the tone for his entire foreign policy.
It certainly solidified his hatred of radicalism. Though interestingly, the sources hint at that emotional detachment Joseph drilled into him. He was shocked, politically enraged, but he didn't mourn her like a nephew mourning an aunt.
He mourned her like a...
He mourned her like a king mourning a violated treaty. It was a declaration of war against his caste.
So he goes to war. The French Revolutionary Wars begin.
And they go poorly. Francis leads the empire into war against France. And let's be honest, the Austrians are old-fashioned, slow, and bureaucratic. The French are energized, chaotic, and massive.
They're a whole different kind of army.
A different world. Francis loses the left bank of the Rhine. He loses influence in Italy. He's getting beaten up on the battlefield.
But the military losses are almost secondary to the existential crisis that starts brewing around 1804. This is where the Doppelkaiser plot really kicks in. This is the moment where Francis has to get creative.
1804 is the turning point.
Yeah.
That's when Napoleon decides that being first consul isn't cool enough anymore.
No.
He wants an upgrade. He wants the big chair.
He wants the big chair.
Exactly. Napoleon crowns himself Emperor of the French. Now, to a modern listener, that just sounds like another title. King, Emperor, what's the difference? But we have to understand what Emperor meant in 1804. For 1,000 years, in Western Europe, there was only one emperor.
The Holy Roman Emperor. It was a singular title. It was like being the Pope. There's only one.
Uniqueness was the whole point. It linked back to Rome, to Charlemagne. It carried supreme prestige. Kings were powerful, but the emperor was the emperor. He was the first among monarchs. He had precedence.
So if Napoleon calls himself emperor, he's challenging the entire hierarchy of the universe as Francis understands it.
He is crashing the exclusive club. And Francis realizes that the Holy Roman Empire structure is crumbling. It's weak. It's bankrupt of authority. The German princes are starting to look at Napoleon with interest.
They're sniffing the wind?
They are. So Francis does the math.
Yeah.
If the Holy Roman Empire dissolves and he is left as just the Archduke of Austria, he will be outranked by Napoleon.
He can't have that. It's about status, but in diplomacy, status is power. If you walk into a room and you have to bow to the other guy, you've already lost the negotiation.
Precisely. If he is just a king or an archduke, he has to walk behind Napoleon at the peace conference. So Francis pulls a legal maneuver that is, frankly, brilliant and bizarre. On August 11, 1804, he issues a patent declaring himself the hereditary Emperor of Austria.
Wait, so he just invented a promotion for himself?
Essentially.
Yeah.
He took his dynastic lands, Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, Croatia, and just wrapped them up in a new imperial title. He created a new container for his power.
So for 2 years, from 1804 to 1806, he is Francis II, Holy Roman Emperor.
And Francis III, Emperor of Austria.
At the same time, he's the emperor of 2 different empires.
Yes, he is the Doppelkaiser.
I love the analogy we use in the prep notes. It's like a CEO realizing his old legacy company, the Holy Roman Empire, is about to go bankrupt. It's full of debt, bad contracts, the board of directors hates him. So he quietly incorporates a new shell company, Austria Inc., transfers all his best assets, the real estate, the cash, the factories, to the new company, and appoints himself CEO of that one, too.
That is almost exactly what happened.
Yeah.
It was corporate restructuring on a dynastic level. And the funny thing is, technically, under imperial law, this was completely illegal.
Illegal.
You couldn't just invent a new imperial title within the Holy Roman Empire. It defied the Constitution.
So why didn't anyone stop him? Why didn't the lawyers jump in?
Because Napoleon agreed to it, Napoleon recognized the title, and because Napoleon had the biggest army in Europe, if he said it was okay, it was okay.
Makes right.
Napoleon didn't care about the legality. He liked the idea of another emperor because it validated his own new title. See, emperors are a thing now. It's the new trend.
But the old company, the Holy Roman Empire, didn't last much longer, did it? The bankruptcy was coming.
No. The end came in 1806. Napoleon established the Confederation of the Rhine.
Which was what, exactly?
Basically, Napoleon organized a bunch of German states, Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, that used to be under Francis's jurisdiction. He bundled them together and made himself their protector.
He stole Francis's direct reports.
He stole the buffer zone, he stole the army recruitment grounds, and then he issued an ultimatum, July 22, 1806. Napoleon gives Francis until August 10th to abdicate as Holy Roman Emperor.
Or else what?
Or else French troops march into Vienna again. Or else the destruction of the Habsburg monarchy. A war Francis knew he couldn't win. So on August 6, 1806, Francis bows to the inevitable.
He gives in.
He releases the German states from their allegiance. He declares the Holy Roman Empire dissolved.
That is a massive moment in history. We breeze past it in textbooks, but this institution started with Charlemagne, or Otto the Great, depending on how you count. It defined medieval Europe. It was the structure of the world, and Francis is the guy who turns off the lights.
He is the liquidator.
Yeah.
And that has to be a humiliation. To be the monarch who loses the title that his ancestors held for centuries,
Right.
It's a stain on his honor. He's the guy who let the torch go out.
Yeah.
But, and this is the key to Francis, because he had created the Emperor of Austria title 2 years earlier, he didn't fall into obscurity.
He had a parachute.
He had a golden parachute. He remained an emperor. He preserved his rank. If he hadn't done that, he would have just been another defeated German prince. But because he was Francis III of Austria, he was still a great power.
The preservation of his own person. Uncle Joseph would be proud. Or maybe horrified.
Or both. In a dark way, yes. He saved the furniture while the house burned down.
But the fire wasn't out. The wars with Napoleon kept going. And reading the summary of the next few years, it's just grim for Austria. Austerlitz, Wagram, these are crushing defeats.
They are disasters. The Treaty of Pressburg, the Treaty of Schönbrunn, Austria is losing territory left and right. They lose Venice, they lose Dalmatia, they lose Tyrol. At one point, Austria becomes entirely landlocked.
Wow.
Its preeminence in Germany is shattered. The treasury is empty. They are printing paper money that is becoming worthless.
It seems hopeless. The Austrian Empire, this new thing he built, is teetering on the edge. But then in 1809, after another defeat, Francis does something that I think defines his survival at all costs mentality. He makes an alliance with the man who has been tormenting him.
He doesn't just make an alliance, he seals it with a marriage.
This is the part that blows my mind. He marries off his daughter, Marie-Louise, to Napoleon.
Think about the psychological toll of that. Napoleon is the man who forced Francis to dissolve the Holy Roman Empire. He is the Antichrist of the Revolution. He is the enemy of everything that Habsburgs stand for. He's a usurper.
Not an upstart.
And now Francis has to give him his own daughter.
And Napoleon had just divorced his first wife, Josephine, because she couldn't give him an heir. So Marie-Louise isn't just going there to be a trophy wife.
No.
She is being sent into the lion's den as a broodmare for the enemy. She is there to breed the next generation of Bonaparte.
Precisely. She was terrified. She grew up calling Napoleon the ogre. She had dolls named Napoleon that she would stick pins in.
Right.
And Francis, he signed the contract.
How does a father do that? I mean, I know they are royals and it's a different world, but still.
It's ultimate pragmatism, is putting the state and his own throne above everything.
Yeah.
Above pride, above family feelings. There's a scene in the sources where Metternich, the foreign minister who is rising to power right now, brings the proposal to Francis. And Francis just asks, what does my daughter say?
Oh, so he puts it on her.
He pushes the decision onto her, but he knows she has no choice. He sacrifices her to save the dynasty.
And it worked.
It bought Austria time, it stopped the wars, it gave them a few years to rebuild the army and the economy, while Napoleon went off to fight other people.
But Francis was never truly loyal to Napoleon, was he? Even as a father-in-law, even when his grandson was born.
Never. He was biding his time, he was waiting for the wind to change, he sent his daughter to Paris, but he kept his powder dry in Vienna.
And in 1812, the wind changed.
Russia.
Right.
Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia. He marches in with the Grand Armée, hundreds of thousands of men, and comes back with a handful of frozen survivors. He is weak. And this is Francis's moment.
Does he hesitate? I mean, his daughter is the Empress of France. His grandson is the King of Rome. If he attacks Napoleon, he's attacking his own family.
He doesn't hesitate for a second. The preservation of his own person and his empire comes first. In 1813, Austria switches sides. Again.
Big switcheroo.
Francis joins the Sixth Coalition. Russia, Prussia, Britain, Sweden. And this time, they win. They defeat Napoleon at Leipzig in the Battle of Nations, and then they march on Paris.
And suddenly, the guy who was losing for 20 years is the host of the victory party, the Congress of Vienna.
It was a triumph for Francis. He hosts all the monarchs of Europe in Vienna. It's months of balls, banquets, and backroom deals. The city is glittering. Beethoven is conducting concerts. And this is where we have to mention his right-hand man, Clemens von Metternich.
The famous chancellor. We can't tell this story without him.
Francis and Metternich were a formidable team. Metternich was the face-charming, brilliant, diplomatic, the guy who could talk circles around anyone. Francis was the anchor, stubborn, cautious, the final authority.
A decision maker.
At the Congress, they reshaped the map of Europe. They restored Austria as a major power. They got back most of the territory they had lost, including in Italy.
And they set up a system, the Holy Alliance, to crush any future revolutions.
The system, that's what they called it. The idea was that the great powers would work together to stomp out liberalism wherever it appeared. If students rioted in Italy, Austrian troops would march in. If Poland rose up, Russia would crush it. It was a police state on a continental level.
So Francis goes from the stunted child to the liquidator of the empire to the savior of the old order.
It's quite the arc. And it brings us to his domestic policy. Because while he was reshaping Europe, he was also reshaping how Austria was run. And this is where the good father image clashes with the reality of a police state.
Yeah, let's talk about that image. If you look at the paintings from this time, specifically the ones by Peter Fendi, Francis looks like the sweetest guy.
He really does.
He's surrounded by grandkids, he's smiling, he's wearing comfortable clothes. The source material says he was very approachable, right?
Yes, famously so. He held audiences twice a week. Anyone, peasant, merchant, noble, could make an appointment to see the emperor. And he would speak to them in their own language, German, Italian, maybe a bit of Czech or Hungarian.
That's incredible.
That was very important to him. He wanted to be seen as the father of his people. He walked around Vienna without guards. He bought toys for children in the shops.
The Biedermeier emperor, cozy, safe, like a grandfather clock.
There's a but, a very big but. While he was playing the benevolent father, he was terrified of dissent. Remember the Jacobin conspiracy in 1794?
Right, that was early in his reign.
A group of officers in the Austrian and Hungarian armies were caught reading French revolutionary pamphlets. Some were plotting. Francis cracked down hard. Officers were hanged. Many died in prison. That event scarred him.
So he was convinced it could happen again at any moment.
He was convinced that revolution was hiding under every bed, in every book, in every song.
So he built a spy network.
And a massive one. He expanded the police state to levels that were previously unknown in Central Europe. He created a bureaucracy of surveillance. The sources mention that he even had spies watching his own brothers, Archduke Charles and Archduke Johann.
He spied on his own brothers.
Trust no one. The preservation of his own person. He didn't want any rival power centers, even within his family. Archduke Charles was a war hero. He was the one general who actually beat Napoleon once.
Right, at Aspern-Essling.
Exactly. And Francis was jealous and suspicious of his popularity. So the police watched him. They opened his mail.
And censorship. The sources describe it as suffocating.
It was. Books, plays, newspapers, everything was checked. You couldn't import books from abroad without a permit. There's a great anecdote in the source material about the playwright Franz Grillparzer.
Oh, Grillparzer. Yes, he's like the Austrian Shakespeare of that era.
A brilliant writer and a Habsburg patriot. He wasn't a revolutionary, he was a loyal subject. But the censors banned one of his plays as a precautionary measure.
Precautionary, that's amazing, banning it just in case.
Exactly. When Grillparzer finally met the censor and asked, "What is wrong with the play? What did I say? Is there a line I should change?" The censor replied, and this is a direct quote, "Oh, nothing at all." But I thought to myself, one can never tell.
One can never tell. That is chilling. It's the logic of a totalitarian bureaucracy. Better to silence something innocent than risk letting something dangerous slip through.
That sums up the later years of Francis's reign perfectly. It was an era of stability, yes. The wars were over, people could make money, they could listen to music, but it was a stifling stability.
He was trying to freeze time.
To prevent any new ideas, any liberalism, any nationalism from taking root, he famously told a group of professors, "I do not need savants, I need good citizens."
He wanted subjects, not thinkers.
He even cut the military budget drastically in his later years to save money and prevent the army from becoming too powerful, which would cause huge problems for his successors in 1848 and 1866. But for his lifetime, it kept things quiet.
It's ironic because one of the things he commissioned to boost patriotism during the wars is still with us today, the anthem.
Yes. This connects back to the struggle with Napoleon. During the wars with France, he saw how the French had La Marseillaise, this rousing revolutionary song that got everyone pumped up, and the British had God Save the King.
Yeah.
He realized Austria needed a patriotic song to rally the people around him.
So he hired the best.
So he commissioned the great composer, Joseph Haydn.
Talk about hiring top talent. That's like hiring Beyoncé to write your campaign jingle.
And Haydn wrote, Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser.
God Save Emperor Francis.
It premiered in 1797 on the emperor's birthday. And the melody. Well, if you listen to the German national anthem today, the Deutschlandlied, it is that same melody.
So every time the German football team plays, they are technically humming a tune written for Francis.
In a way, yes. It's a musical legacy that outlasted his empire. And it reflects his desire for unity and loyalty.
Francis died in 1835 at the age of 67. The source says he died of a sudden fever.
And true to form, his final thoughts were about the family and the preservation of the system. His political testament to his son and heir, Ferdinand, was, preserve unity in the family and regard it as one of the highest goods.
Which is rich, coming from the guy who spied on his brothers.
Well, perhaps he spied on them to ensure unity. Enforced unity is still unity in his mind.
That is a very Francis way of looking at it.
Indeed. And he also told Ferdinand, govern and change nothing.
change nothing.
which Ferdinand, who was intellectually disabled and very reliant on Metternich, followed religiously. But the pressure cooker eventually exploded in 1848, a decade later. Francis put a lid on the pot, but he didn't turn off the heat.
He bought stability for his lifetime, but at the cost of the future.
That's it exactly.
So let's zoom out. We have gone through the abuse, the wars, the title changes, the police state. When we look at Francis II tonight, what is the verdict?
He is a man of contradictions. He was a stunted child who grew up to outlast the greatest conqueror of his age. He was a loving patriarch who ran a police state. He was the man who lost the Holy Roman Empire, which is a huge failure on paper, but he successfully pivoted to build the Austrian Empire, which lasted until 1918.
It brings up a really interesting, provocative thought. History loves the Napoleons. We love the bold innovators, the generals who smash the board and rewrite the rules. They are exciting. We write movies about them. We quote them.
But they also tend to burn out. Napoleon died in exile on a rock in the Atlantic, alone and defeated. Francis died in his own bed, in his own capital, leaving his throne to his son with his empire intact.
So the question for you, the listener, is this. In times of chaos, in times of massive disruption, what is the better form of success? Is it better to be the brilliant flame that burns bright and crashes? Or is it better to be the Francis, the pragmatic, cautious, maybe slightly paranoid bureaucrat who bends and shifts and compromises, but survives to write the rules?
It's the tortoise and the hare, on an imperial scale.
Yeah.
And in this case, the tortoise kept the crown.
That's all for today's deep dive into the Doppelkaiser. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.